The luxurious Grand Plaza Hotel stood tall in the heart of Manhattan, its gleaming glass doors reflecting the early morning sunlight. Sarah Bennett adjusted her designer blazer as she walked confidently toward the entrance, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor of the lobby. At 35, she had built her tech company from the ground up, turning it into a billion-dollar empire. Today, she was here for an important business meeting that could expand her company even further. The hotel's lobby was impressive, with crystal chandeliers hanging from high ceilings and expensive artwork decorating the walls. Other guests moved about, being greeted warmly by the staff. Sarah noticed how the front desk employees smiled and quickly helped the white guests checking in before her. As she approached the front desk, Sarah maintained her professional smile. The manager, Thomas Richardson, a man in his 40s with graying hair and an expensive suit, looked up at her. His welcoming smile disappeared quickly, replaced by a cold stare. "Good morning," Sarah said politely. "I have a reservation for the executive suite. The name is Sarah Bennett." Thomas typed slowly on his computer, his fingers deliberately hitting each key as if he was already certain of what he would say. "I'm sorry, but I don't see any reservation under that name." Sarah remained calm, reaching into her designer handbag. "I have the confirmation email right here," she said, showing him her phone screen. "It was confirmed 3 weeks ago." Thomas barely glanced at the phone. "Our system must have had a glitch. Unfortunately, we are fully booked right now." As he spoke, he turned and handed keys to a white couple who had just walked up, saying, "Welcome to the Grand Plaza Hotel. We've upgraded you to a better suite." Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly, but she kept her voice steady. "I specifically booked the executive suite for my business meeting. Could you please check again?" "Listen," Thomas said, lowering his voice and leaning forward. "Perhaps you would be more comfortable at the Holiday Inn downtown. It might be more suitable for your needs." A well-dressed white woman standing nearby gasped quietly at his words, looking embarrassed for witnessing the scene. But Sarah had faced discrimination before. It had followed her even as she built her company and gained success. The only difference was that now, people were usually more subtle about it. "I understand," Sarah said calmly, though her heart was beating faster with controlled anger. "Could I have your full name and employee ID number, please?" Thomas straightened up, his face showing a mixture of annoyance and superiority. "I am Thomas Richardson, the front desk manager. If you have any complaints, you can file them through our customer service department." He smiled coldly. "Though I doubt they'll find any evidence of wrongdoing. We simply don't have a room for you." Sarah took out her business card and placed it on the counter. "Thank you, Mr. Richardson. You've been very informative." She turned to leave but stopped and added, "By the way, my company is worth $3.2 billion. I was here to discuss buying a significant stake in your hotel chain's parent company. I think I'll be making different arrangements now." The color drained from Thomas's face as he looked down at her business card, finally recognizing her name. Sarah Bennett was indeed one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the country, though she rarely appeared in public photos. "Miss Bennett, there seems to be a misunderstanding. Let me check again." "No need," Sarah said firmly. "You've made your position very clear. Have a good day." As she walked out of the hotel, Sarah's mind was already working on a plan. She pulled out her phone and called her assistant. "Cancel my meeting today, and get me everything you can find about the Grand Plaza Hotel's ownership structure. I think it's time for some changes in the hospitality industry." She got into her waiting car, her determination growing stronger. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been judged by their skin color rather than their character. Thomas Richardson and the Grand Plaza Hotel had no idea what they had just set in motion. Back in her office the next day, Sarah sat in her leather chair, staring at her computer screen. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she dug deeper into the Grand Plaza Hotel's history. What she found made her blood boil. Her assistant, Maria, knocked and entered with a thick folder. "Miss Bennett, I found what you asked for. It's worse than we thought." Maria placed the folder on Sarah's desk and opened it. "In the past 5 years, there have been 23 similar incidents at the Grand Plaza. All of them involved successful people of color." Sarah picked up the first report. It was about Dr. James Wilson, a famous heart surgeon who had been turned away despite having a confirmed reservation. The next one was about a well-known African-American judge who mysteriously couldn't get a room during a legal conference. How do they keep this quiet? Sarah asked, flipping through more reports. Maria sat down across from her. Money and connections. The hotel's parent company, Luxury Stays International, has powerful lawyers. They usually offer free stays or upgrades at other hotels to keep people from complaining publicly. Sarah stood up and walked to her office window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. So they buy people's silence, she said quietly, and everyone just accepts it. Most people don't want the hassle of a legal battle, Maria explained. Even when they have proof, fighting a big company takes time and money. Plus, the hotel is careful. They never say anything openly racist. It's always about lost reservations or computer errors. Sarah turned back to her desk and picked up another document. This one showed the hotel's employee statistics. Look at this, she said. In 10 years, they haven't had a single person of color in upper management. Not one. As she read more, Sarah discovered that Thomas Richardson, the manager who had turned her away, had been promoted 3 times in 5 years. Each promotion happened shortly after he had handled what the hotel called difficult situations. Their code word for turning away non-white guests. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from her friend Rachel, a successful black lawyer who had stayed at the Grand Plaza last year. Just heard what happened to you. The message read. Same thing happened to me. They said my reservation was lost, but I saw them give my room to someone else right after. Maria, Sarah called, get me everything you can find about Luxury Stays International's financial situation. Stock prices, debt, everything. While Maria worked on that, Sarah made some calls to other business owners she knew. Each call revealed similar stories. Some had faced discrimination themselves, while others had heard about it from friends. The pattern was clear. The Grand Plaza Hotel had been discriminating against people of color for years, hiding behind its prestigious name and powerful lawyers. Later that afternoon, Maria returned with more news. The company isn't doing well, she reported, showing Sarah some financial charts. Their stock prices have been falling for the past 2 years. They're carrying a lot of debt, and 3 of their hotels are losing money. Sarah smiled for the first time that day. So they're vulnerable, she said, reaching for her phone. Get me Jack from the legal department. I need to know exactly how much of their stock is available for purchase. As she waited for Jack to arrive, Sarah looked at a photo on her desk. It showed her as a young girl with her parents, standing in front of their small house. Her father had always told her, when people show you who they are, believe them, but don't just get angry, get smart. Well, Dad, she whispered to the photo, I'm about to get very smart. She turned to her computer and opened a new document, typing at the top, Operation Grand Takeover, Phase 1. The Grand Plaza Hotel thought they could continue their discriminatory practices without consequences. They thought money and lawyers would protect them forever, but they had never faced someone like Sarah Bennett before. She wasn't going to file a complaint or accept a free stay at another hotel. She was going to change the system from the inside out. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah's office turned into a command center. Large screens displayed stock prices, company information, and detailed charts about Luxury Stays International. She had gathered a small, trusted team to help her plan what would become her most important business move yet. The company owns 12 hotels, Jack, her legal advisor, explained during their morning meeting. The Grand Plaza is their flagship property, but they're struggling to keep up with modern hotel chains. He pointed to a financial chart on the wall screen. Their stock price has dropped 40% in the last year alone. Sarah nodded, making notes on her tablet. How much would it cost to buy controlling interest? Lisa, her financial expert, stepped forward. Based on current market prices, we'd need about $800 million to acquire 51% of the company. She paused, looking at Sarah. That's a lot of money, even for you. Money well spent if we can make real change, Sarah replied, thinking about all the people who had been humiliated at the Grand Plaza. What's our best approach? We need to be careful, Jack warned. If they realize what we're doing, they'll try to block the takeover. They have some powerful board members who won't want to lose control. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, remembering Thomas Richardson's smug face. Then we'll be smarter than them. Lisa, create 5 separate investment companies. Use different banks. different lawyers, different everything. No one should be able to connect them to me. The team worked late into the evening, planning every detail. They decided to buy shares slowly through different companies, making it look like normal market activity. Sarah would stay completely hidden until they had enough control to make changes. The next morning, Maria brought more interesting news. "Look at this," she said, showing Sarah some employee reviews on her tablet. "The hotel staff isn't happy either. There's high turnover in the lower positions, especially among minority employees. They say the management is discriminatory in promotions and assignments." Sarah's determination grew stronger. This wasn't just about buying a hotel anymore. It was about changing a toxic culture that hurt people at every level. She called her team back for another meeting. "We need to do this right," she told them. "I want plans for new training programs, fair hiring policies, and clear promotion paths. When we take over, we're going to transform this place completely." Jack raised a concern. "What about Thomas Richardson and the current management team? They'll resist these changes." Sarah smiled confidently. "Let them try. Once we have control, they'll either adapt to the new way of doing things or find somewhere else to work. But first, we need to get our pieces in place without them suspecting anything." They spent the next few hours creating a detailed timeline. Phase 1 would involve quietly buying shares through their shell companies. Phase 2 would focus on gathering more evidence of discrimination and identifying potential allies among the staff. Phase 3 would be the takeover itself, followed immediately by implementing new policies. "One more thing," Sarah said as the meeting was ending. "I want to set up a scholarship program for minority students in hotel management. The Grand Plaza won't just stop discrimination. It's going to actively help create the next generation of diverse hotel leaders." That evening, as her team left the office, Sarah stayed behind to review their plans one final time. She opened her laptop and looked at the Grand Plaza's website, where Thomas Richardson's photo appeared under "Our Management Team." Soon, that would change. Her phone buzzed with a message from one of her investigators. "Found 3 more cases of discrimination from last month alone. All documented. Should we add them to the file?" "Add everything," Sarah texted back. "We're going to need it all." She leaned back in her chair, feeling more certain than ever about her decision. The Grand Plaza Hotel had spent years putting up invisible barriers to keep people like her out. Now she was about to show them that those barriers weren't just wrong, they were about to come crashing down. "Time to move some money," she said to herself, opening her banking app. Phase 1 of Operation Grand Takeover was about to begin. 3 months passed as Sarah's plan moved forward quietly but steadily. Each morning, she checked the progress of her various shell companies as they purchased more shares in Luxury Stays International. The stock prices were rising slightly as the market noticed increased buying activity, but no one knew who was behind it. "We just reached 30% ownership," Lisa reported during their private morning meeting. She showed Sarah the latest numbers on her tablet. "The board is starting to ask questions about who's buying all these shares." Sarah smiled, remembering how Thomas Richardson had dismissed her that day at the hotel. "Let them wonder," she said. "How are our other moves going?" Maria pulled up another report on the large screen. "Everything is proceeding perfectly. We've identified several employees at the Grand Plaza who would support changes in management. Some have been keeping secret records of discrimination for years." One of these employees was Jenny Martinez, a front desk worker who had witnessed Thomas Richardson's discriminatory practices firsthand. She had carefully documented every incident, hoping someday someone would care enough to make changes. "Look at this," Maria continued, showing Sarah an email. "Richardson just rejected another successful black businessman last week. Same excuse about lost reservations, but this time, Jenny recorded the whole thing on her phone." Sarah leaned forward, interested. "Is she willing to help us?" "She's eager to," Maria confirmed. "There's a whole group of employees who are tired of watching this happen but felt powerless to stop it." Just then, Jack burst into the office, looking excited. "Sarah, you need to see this." He quickly pulled up a news article on the main screen. Luxury Stays International just announced they're looking for new investors. They're struggling with debt and need capital. Sarah's eyes lit up. This was the opportunity they'd been waiting for. Perfect timing. "Lisa, prepare another 100 million. We'll make our move through the Singapore company this time." The team worked through the day, carefully orchestrating their next steps. By evening, their ownership had increased to 40%. The hotel's board was now officially worried, calling emergency meetings to discuss the mysterious buyers. Sarah received a text from her contact inside the hotel. Richardson is panicking. Board keeps asking him about declining customer satisfaction scores. He's blaming everything on changing demographics in the city. You'll have much more to panic about soon, Sarah muttered to herself. Later that night, Sarah met with her team again. We're almost there, she said, looking at each person in the room. Tomorrow, we make our final push. I want to hit 51% before they can organize any resistance. Lisa raised a concern. The business papers are starting to speculate about who's behind the buyout. Some think it's a foreign investment group. Sarah laughed. Let them guess. By the time they figure it out, it'll be too late. The next morning, Sarah arrived at her office early. Today was the day they would cross the threshold and gain controlling interest in the company. She thought about all the people who had been turned away from the Grand Plaza, all the careers that had been stunted by discrimination, all the talent that had been wasted because of prejudice. Miss Bennett, Maria called from the door, you need to see this. She handed Sarah a tablet showing the memo from Thomas Richardson to the hotel staff. In it, he blamed the hotel's problems on changing standards and maintaining our traditional client base. Traditional client base, Sarah repeated, shaking her head. Well, Mr. Richardson, your traditional ways are about to change. By afternoon, the final purchases were complete. Through her various shell companies, Sarah now owned 53% of Luxury Stays International. She had controlling interest in the company, including the Grand Plaza Hotel. Should we announce it now? Jack asked eagerly. Sarah shook her head, a determined smile on her face. Not yet. First, I want to implement some changes quietly. Let's see how Mr. Richardson handles following directions from his new mystery boss. She turned to her team. Start with new hiring policies and anti-discrimination training requirements. Mark them as urgent corporate directives. As her team left to prepare the documents, Sarah stood at her office window, looking in the direction of the Grand Plaza Hotel. Soon, very soon, she would walk through those doors again, but this time, she wouldn't be asking for a room. She would be giving the orders. The next 2 weeks brought big changes to the Grand Plaza Hotel. New policies arrived daily from the mysterious corporate owner, all focused on diversity and inclusion. Thomas Richardson sat in his office, staring at the latest memo with growing frustration. This is ridiculous, he muttered, reading the document again. Mandatory diversity training for all managers. Weekly reports on hiring statistics. Who's making these decisions? His assistant, Jenny Martinez, watched him from the doorway, hiding a small smile. She knew exactly who was behind these changes, having secretly met with Sarah's team the week before. The new corporate training starts tomorrow, Mr. Richardson, Jenny reminded him. All managers must attend. Thomas looked up, frowning. I've been managing hotels for 15 years. I don't need training on how to do my job. The next morning, the hotel's conference room was filled with managers and supervisors. A professional trainer, hired by Sarah's team, stood at the front of the room. Today, we're going to discuss unconscious bias and its impact on the hospitality industry, the trainer began. Let's start with some real examples. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his chair as the trainer showed slides of discrimination cases from various hotels, though the Grand Plaza's cases were carefully left out for now. During the lunch break, Thomas gathered some of his loyal managers in his office. This is getting out of hand, he complained. First, they want us to change our hiring practices, now this training. They're trying to change everything about how we run this hotel. Maybe change isn't such a bad thing, said Michael, a younger manager who had always felt uncomfortable with the hotel's unspoken policies. Our customer reviews have been dropping, and we've lost some good employees. We've maintained certain standards for a reason, Thomas argued. Our regular guests expect a particular atmosphere. Later that afternoon, another memo arrived. This one announced a new mentorship program for junior employees, with priority given to minorities. Thomas crumpled the paper and threw it in his trash bin. He decided to take action. Using his connections, he arranged a meeting with one of the hotel's longtime board members, Mr. Harrison. Something strange is happening, Thomas told Harrison over dinner. Some unknown investor is buying up shares and forcing all these changes. They're destroying everything we built. Harrison looked troubled. We tried to track down who's behind the purchases, but they're using multiple companies across different countries. Whoever it is, they're very smart. Can't we stop them? Thomas asked desperately. They already own controlling interest, Harrison replied. There's nothing we can do except follow their directives or resign. Back at the hotel the next day, Thomas found more changes waiting. The new hiring policy required all job openings to be publicly posted, with diverse candidate requirements. The practice of marking certain guests as preferred, a code used to discriminate, was officially ended. Sarah, watching everything through her network of contacts, decided to increase the pressure. She sent another corporate directive. All customer rejection incidents had to be documented with clear reasons and submitted for review. This is impossible. Thomas exploded when he read it. We can't run a hotel if we have to justify every decision. Jenny spoke up from her desk. Actually, sir, it's standard practice in most modern hotels. It protects both the hotel and the guests from misunderstandings. Thomas glared at her. Since when are you an expert on hotel management? I've been taking online courses in hotel administration, Jenny replied calmly. The new education support program is paying for it. That evening, Thomas stayed late in his office, surrounded by the new policy documents. Everything he had built his career on was changing. The subtle signals, the unspoken understandings, the careful management of guest lists, it was all being swept away. His phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Harrison. Board meeting tomorrow. Big announcement coming. New owner finally revealing themselves. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. Tomorrow, you would finally meet the person behind all these changes. Little did he know, he had already met her, on a day he would soon regret very much. The Grand Plaza Hotel's main conference room was packed with staff members, managers, and board directors. Thomas Richardson sat in the front row, tugging at his tie nervously. The room buzzed with whispers about the mysterious new owner who had been changing everything. I heard it's a big hotel chain from Europe, one manager whispered. No, my friend in accounting thinks it's a group from Dubai, another replied. Mr. Harrison, the board member, stood at the podium. Thank you all for coming today. As you know, our company has undergone significant changes recently. Today, you'll meet the person responsible for these new directions. The door opened, and Sarah Bennett walked in, wearing a perfectly tailored business suit. Thomas's face turned pale as he recognized her immediately. Jenny Martinez, sitting in the back, couldn't help but smile. Good morning, everyone, Sarah said, taking her place at the podium. I'm Sarah Bennett, and I now own 53% of Luxury Stays International, including the Grand Plaza Hotel. The room fell silent. Thomas felt like the floor was spinning beneath him. This was the same woman he had turned away 3 months ago. Some of you may remember me, Sarah continued, her eyes meeting Thomas's. I tried to stay here as a guest earlier this year. Unfortunately, my reservation was mysteriously lost that day. People in the room started whispering, connecting the dots. Many had witnessed that incident or heard about it. Mr. Richardson, Sarah called out, would you like to explain to everyone why my reservation was lost that day? Thomas stood up shakily. There must have been a computer error. His voice trailed off as Sarah held up a thick folder. A computer error? Like these other errors that happened to dozens of successful professionals of color over the past 5 years? She opened the folder. Dr. James Wilson, Judge Patricia Thompson, Professor Michael Jean, all had their reservations lost under your management. The room erupted in murmurs. Some staff members nodded, having witnessed these incidents themselves. That's all in the past, Sarah announced. Today marks the beginning of real change. The Grand Plaza will become a model of inclusive excellence in the hospitality industry. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with new plans. We're launching a comprehensive training program, creating fair hiring practices, and establishing a scholarship fund for minority students in hotel management. Thomas raised his hand. Miss Bennett, are you firing the current management team? Sarah's response surprised everyone. No, Mr. Richardson, I'm not firing anyone yet. Instead, I'm giving everyone a chance to learn, grow, and change. Those who can adapt will have a place in the new Grand Plaza. Those who can't, she paused meaningfully, will need to find opportunities elsewhere. Jenny stood up from her seat. Miss Bennett, some of us have been documenting the discrimination we've seen. Would you like that information? Thank you, Jenny, Sarah smiled. Your courage in keeping those records is one reason you're being promoted to assistant manager of guest relations. Thomas sank deeper into his chair as Sarah continued outlining the changes. New customer service protocols, transparent booking systems, diverse hiring panels. Everything he had resisted was now becoming policy. One last thing, Sarah said, nearing the end of her presentation. In 2 weeks, we're hosting a special event. We're inviting back every guest who has ever turned away from this hotel due to discrimination. They'll be our VIP guests, receiving the treatment they deserved from the beginning. As the meeting ended, staff members approached Sarah with stories, suggestions, and thanks. Thomas watched from his chair, still stunned by the turn of events. Mr. Richardson, Sarah called out as the room emptied. I'd like to see you in your office. Well, my office now, in 5 minutes. We need to discuss your role in the new Grand Plaza. As Thomas walked slowly toward his office, he finally understood the magnitude of his mistakes. He had judged Sarah Bennett by her skin color, never imagining she would end up being his boss. Now, his entire future depended on whether he could truly change. 1 month after Sarah's dramatic revelation, the Grand Plaza Hotel was undergoing remarkable changes. Thomas Richardson sat in a smaller office, his new workspace since being demoted to assistant manager, reviewing customer feedback forms. The latest reviews were overwhelmingly positive. Your hotel has really changed. One comment read, the staff is so welcoming to everyone now. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. Thomas remembered his intense conversation with Sarah Bennett after the big meeting. He had expected to be fired, but she had surprised him again. I'm giving you a choice, Mr. Richardson, Sarah had told him. You can leave with a decent severance package, or you can learn from this experience and help make real changes. But if you stay, you'll need to start from a lower position and prove yourself again. He had chosen to stay, though pride made it difficult. Now, sitting in his smaller office, he was beginning to understand things differently. Jenny Martinez, the newly promoted assistant manager of guest relations, knocked on his door. The diversity training session is starting in 10 minutes, Mr. Richardson. This one's about cultural sensitivity in customer service. Thomas nodded and gathered his notepad. These training sessions, which he had once mocked, were opening his eyes to things he had never considered before. In the training room, Sarah herself was present today. She had made it a point to be personally involved in the hotel's transformation. The trainer, Dr. Williams, was discussing real-life scenarios. Here's a situation from last month, Dr. Williams said. A group of Asian business executives were assumed to be tourist group leaders rather than CEOs. How should this have been handled differently? Thomas raised his hand, surprising everyone. We should treat every guest with the same level of respect, regardless of their appearance. Our assumptions and biases can cost us valuable customers and, more importantly, hurt people. Sarah watched him thoughtfully. It wasn't just empty words. She had seen genuine changes in his behavior over the past month. During the lunch break, Thomas overheard 2 housekeepers talking excitedly about the new promotion system. Can you believe it? One said, Maria got promoted to supervisor based on her actual performance record, not just who she knows. Back in his office, Thomas reviewed the new guest registration system. It was completely transparent now. All reservations were tracked digitally, and any cancellations required documented reasons. No more mysterious lost reservations. Later that afternoon, Sarah called Thomas to her office. He found her reviewing the hotel's latest performance reports. Our bookings are up 20%, she told him. Turns out, treating everyone with respect is good for business. She looked at him directly. How are you adjusting to the changes, Thomas? He took a deep breath. It's been eye-opening. I've worked in hotels for 15 years, thinking I knew everything about this business. But I'm learning something new every day. Like what? Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Like how many talented people I overlooked because of my biases, he admitted. Yesterday, I interviewed a young black woman for a front desk position. Before, I would have. Well, you know. But she has a degree in hospitality management and speaks 3 languages. She'll be an asset to our team. Sarah nodded approvingly. That's the kind of thinking we need. As Thomas left her office, he passed the wall where Sarah had hung framed photos of different guests and staff members, a diverse collection of people who represented the hotel's new identity. His own photo was there too, smaller now, but part of the bigger picture. That evening, as Thomas prepared to leave, a familiar face appeared at the front desk. Dr. James Wilson, one of the guests he had turned away last year. Instead of avoiding him, Thomas walked over. "Dr. Wilson," he said, extending his hand. "I owe you an apology. The way you were treated here was wrong. I was wrong. I hope you'll give me, a chance to make it right." Dr. Wilson studied him for a moment, then shook his hand. "I heard this place was changing. Maybe it's true after all." Thomas smiled slightly. "We're learning. I'm learning. And we're better for it." 1 year after Sarah Bennett's takeover, the Grand Plaza Hotel had become a symbol of positive change in the hospitality industry. The hotel's grand ballroom was filled with people celebrating its transformation during the first annual Diversity in Hospitality Awards ceremony. Sarah stood at the podium, looking out at the diverse crowd of industry leaders, hotel staff, and students. "A year ago, I was turned away from this very hotel," she began. "Today, we're not just welcoming everyone, we're helping create a new generation of hotel industry leaders." In the audience, Thomas Richardson sat next to Jenny Martinez, both now working as trainers for the hotel's innovative inclusion programs. The past year had changed them all in ways they never expected. "Our scholarship program has already helped 50 students from underrepresented backgrounds start their careers in hotel management," Sarah continued. 10 of them are working here at the Grand Plaza, learning every aspect of the business. Among these students was Maria Chen, a young Asian American woman who had once been rejected for a front desk position. Now she was managing the entire morning shift, consistently receiving excellent customer reviews. "But our biggest success," Sarah said, "isn't in the numbers, it's in the stories." She gestured to a screen behind her, which showed photos of guests and staff members. "It's in the wealthy businessman who no longer has his reservation lost because of his skin color. It's in the young employee who gets promoted based on talent, not prejudice. It's in the guests who tell us they feel truly welcome here." Thomas shifted in his seat, remembering his own journey. After his demotion, he had almost quit several times. But something kept him going, perhaps the desire to prove he could change, or maybe the realization that he had been wrong for so many years. "Mr. Richardson," Sarah called out, surprising him. "Would you please join me on stage?" As Thomas walked up, whispers spread through the audience. Many knew his story, the manager who had once turned away the woman who now owned the hotel. "Thomas has become one of our most effective trainers in our anti-discrimination program," Sarah announced. "He shares his story openly, helping other managers recognize and change their own biases. This takes courage, and it deserves recognition." She handed him an award for outstanding contribution to workplace transformation. Thomas took the microphone, his hands slightly shaking. "A year ago, I was part of the problem," he admitted to the crowd. "I thought I was protecting the hotel's standards, but I was really just protecting my own prejudices. Miss Bennett could have fired me. Instead, she showed me a better way." After the ceremony, Sarah walked through the hotel lobby with a group of scholarship students. The walls now displayed artwork from diverse artists, and the staff behind the desk represented many different backgrounds. "Miss Bennett," called a familiar voice. It was Dr. Wilson, the heart surgeon who had once been turned away. "I just finished my medical conference here. The service was exceptional." Sarah smiled. "I hope you'll come back for next year's conference." "Actually," he replied, "I'm moving all my medical seminars to the Grand Plaza. You've created something special here." Later that evening, Sarah sat in her office, reviewing the hotel's latest achievements. The Grand Plaza now ranked highest in customer satisfaction among luxury hotels in the city. Their training program was being adopted by other hotels, and their scholarship program was expanding nationwide. Jenny knocked on her door. "The new batch of management trainees is here for orientation. Would you like to speak to them?" Sarah walked into the training room, where 20 eager faces looked up at her. They came from all backgrounds, all united by their dream of working in the hospitality industry. "Welcome to the Grand Plaza," she began. "Your journey here starts with a story. My story, but also the story of this hotel. It's a story about how change is possible, how prejudice can be overcome, and how success comes not from excluding people, but from welcoming them." As she looked at their bright, hopeful faces, Sarah knew that the Grand Plaza's new legacy was secure. The hotel that had once turned people away because of their skin color was now teaching the whole industry how to open its doors to everyone.